India, home to 1.3 billion people, is a confluence of religions, traditions and customs. A thriving global center of technology and the world's largest democracy. As one of the oldest civilizations in the world with a rich cultural heritage and diversity, and as the fifth largest economy in the world, India is proud to assume the presidency of G20. As the country blooms into a new era, we look to another poignant symbol for humanity to emerge victorious from challenges. The lotus, the national flower of India, represents our history and culture and symbolizes spirituality, fruitfulness, wealth and knowledge. And that's the inspiration for India's G20 logo design. The design, rendered in saffron, white, green and blue, is drawn from the national flag of India. The 7 petals in the logo signify the 7 seas and the coming together of 7 continents at G20 India 2023. Sitting above the lotus is a representation of the earth, reflecting India's pro-planet approach to life and seeing the world as one family. From this, we derive the theme for G20 India 2023, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future.
The National Institute of Advanced Studies, our director, faculty, scholars, and the admin, the Ministry of External Affairs, the RIS New Delhi, along with the 2 partner institutions of NIAS, the Kristu Jayanti College and Ramaiah University. Let me warmly welcome you for this G20 discussion today at NIAS on engaging young minds. This is a part of the Foreign Ministry's initiative in collaboration with RIS, what they call it as the University Connect. I'm sure you would have heard about that T20, Y20. We are a part of the U20. So we are doing it in collaboration with them. Let me thank you all for being a part of it. Besides these 5 institutions, let me also recognize young scholars from Mysore University, Pondicherry University, and also St. Joseph's University in Bangalore, who are with us today. Let me thank you all for being here with us. The way that we have planned today's post-lunch session, we will have first a welcome note. I'll request our director to formally welcome you all on behalf of the institute and also on behalf of all the institutions. And then we will have the first panel discussion by young scholars. I'll come to this later. And then we will have 4 senior experts from RIS and NIAS responding to the young scholars. So that's the way we have planned to engage with the young minds. So what we have done is, at the institute, we have this initiative called Global Politics Young Voices. In the last couple of years, we have been doing a few regular discussions online, and last month we have started it offline in collaboration with Kristu Jayanti College. We inaugurated it in this very hall. So this Global Politics Young Minds is one of the capacity building exercise, which is one of the principal objectives of the institute as well. So this we have been doing, and so when we came across this idea, MEA and RIS, and they asked us to be a part of this G20 University Connect, we thought it was a wonderful idea to be a part of a larger process. So let me thank both MEA and RIS in involving us, not only National Institute of Advanced Studies, but also other institutions. In the long run, not in the long run, in the next couple of months, we are also planning as an institution, besides those institutions in Bangalore and Chennai and Pondicherry, we are planning to involve a few young faculty and students like you to prepare a policy brief to be submitted to G20 sometime later. We have titled this as, to go along with the larger theme of G20, we have titled this as One World, One Youth, One Future. What youth can do to G20 and also to the future. So that's a policy brief that around 10, 12 institutions, mostly young faculty and students. I'm sure some of you are already part of it, and some of you are here as a part of it. Let me thank you once again. So today's discussion is a part of that process to have that policy brief sometime in March or April, submitting to RIS and the foreign ministry, and we are hoping that it will be good enough, will have sufficient quality to become the part of an official package that the G20 and the G20 summit has. So that's the plan that we have. May I first invite our director to formally welcome you on behalf of the institute. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Subha, my young colleagues and my colleagues from RIS. It's really very pleasure to see you on the other side of the dais and we are on the audience. It's really good. And I must thank Subha and RIS to organize this very important discussion on the preparation towards G20. And one, I think they want the universities connect, what they call essentially to get an idea from the young people what they think about what G20 should be doing. And of course, we have the experts who would be ultimately respond to the questions or the viewpoints which you put forward. One of the important tasks in NIAS is what we call as imparting knowledge on the variety of subjects which is of the societal benefit, not only for the India as a whole, but as a global. And in this context, there are a variety of studies, analysis is being done. Of course, he mentioned one, but he didn't mention many others. We have a specific study on Africa, on Europe, the world this week, Pakistan, neighborhood, and many other topics which directly, indirectly affects, like science and technology, how it affects the international relationship, or how international relations can help the science and technology. So there are many such things, and the most important thing is about all these activities are done by the young scholars. Not only from NIAS, but from many other universities. He mentioned Kristu, Jayanti, Pondicherry University, St. Joseph, I think Madras, Mysore University, and many others. So what we are trying to bring together the young minds and have discussion on this. In this context, I think this opportunity which we have today is very critical. And this is only a beginning. I think we can have a series of such things which can really produce some documents which can be presented to the G20. And I think that should be our goal, that what the youth should be doing, how we can resolve some of the problems, which I'm sure some of them will be telling, from the conflicts to climate change to many others. So I welcome you all to this very important panel discussion, and I hope the discussion would be very fruitful to all of us and to the G20 preparation as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. What we plan to do is, we have 6 young minds here in the table, and also many of you in front of us. What we have planned is, we have identified, not we, they have identified around 12 to 15 areas in which what G20 can do. I was quite surprised, when I approached them with an open question. What are the areas that we can look at? From climate change to conservation to heritage to tourism to coastal protection. I came across subjects that we would have never dreamt of. So we have 6 here, and 6 or 7 more in amidst you. So we will have a quick 3 minutes each presentation, asking 2 questions: what the G20 can do and what the youth in particular can do as a part of the G20. So each one of us will be talking to us on these subjects. That's the way we planned, and then we will end the session maybe by 4 o'clock, and then we will request the seniors, the experts, to come and respond with their own inputs, and also to some of the questions that they have posed or some of the ideas that they have posed. Maybe I'll request you to kindly take note of them, sir, and then you can come back and then talk to us. So that's a way we have planned. I don't know whether you have noticed in this, if you can see there is one odd man out, one odd man out. So that man will go and he will request Avishka. It's only fair this becomes this remains a young mind discussion. So I'll request Avishka. She coordinates the global politics young voices at the institute. She'll coordinate this session. Over to you, Avishka.
Thank you, sir. Very hearty good afternoon and welcome to each and everyone present here. We're gathered here today for the G20 University Connect, which is being conducted as a part of the NIAS Global Politics Young Voices. I'd like to take a minute to introduce this initiative to all of you today. The Global Politics Young Voices, or the GPYV, is a young scholars-led initiative which provides a platform to research scholars and young professionals in universities and institutes across India. Through this initiative, scholars are provided an opportunity to present their paper on contemporary issues of international relations, which is followed by a peer review and discussion. And after a detailed editing process, these papers are published on our portal, the NIAS Global Politics portal. We are also expanding the Global Politics Young Voices to include a Chennai and a Pondicherry chapter. And this is also an expansion of The World This Week, which is the NIAS weekly publication. We are extremely glad to be a part of the G20 University Connect. And on behalf of NIAS, I thank the Ministry of External Affairs, the Government of India, and the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, New Delhi, for providing a platform to these young scholars and engaging with them on the G20. And without further ado, I'd like to invite our first young scholar for the day, Rashmi Ramesh. She is a PhD scholar at NIAS who will be talking about the G20 and the world that is affected by the anthropogenic climate change.
A very good afternoon. It's my privilege to talk here. Climate change, one of the most important sectors or areas of focus, and this theme has been part of the agenda in all the G20 summits consistently, and that shows the kind of importance this carries. And it's also been discussed in Y20 summits, needless to mention, and then India's presidency, under India's presidency of G20, is one of the most important sectors as listed by the government. What I will do is I will look into past 3 Y20 summits and how and what they have discussed on climate change. The Y20 summit 2020 under Saudi Arabia's presidency tried to discuss about the need to deliver on Paris Agreement, and the need to address international legal protection gaps relating to climate refugees and also other vulnerable population. Italy's presidency in 2021 discussed systemic changes for inclusive climate action, just energy transition, and also collaboration with youth institutions. The 2022, the latest in Indonesia that happened, discussed in length about the circular economy, what youth can do, and innovations that are sustainable, and how to create awareness using media tools. And this takes me to the third section of my discussion, which talks about what youth can do now, carrying forward the ideas and suggestions discussed in the previous summits. First, responsible consumers. Our consumption pattern should change, and I feel that is at the heart of climate action. Consciously, youth can definitely hold the power. Youth hold the power to do so, and at their own individual level. So this is a very tangible, grassroots, a possible solution or an action plan. A second one is innovative producers. Our generation is already facing the effects of anthropogenic climate change, and we have a long way to go. The technological innovations that are sustainable are therefore important. The S20 Secretariat is right here on our campus, the IISc, and churning out innovative products and methods will go a long way, and youth participation is possible in a large scale manner. The third one is, of course, the learnings. Learnings from past presidencies through communique or the plans that they have put, and my previous section kind of dealt with that. And of course, the other learning that I will particularly emphasize is the learning from the indigenous youth. We are here in urban centers, but there's a section of youth that's facing climate change much more seriously and in a close manner than us. So learning from them as to whether it is the way they express their climate change concerns, how their conscious lifestyle is, and their fight for climate change, that will go a long way in us planning our climate action policies. The fourth and the last one is about voicing. The power of media is unmatched, and our youth know about it better than the previous generations. And media as a tool for creating awareness, gathering people, pressurizing the policymakers, pressing for action. It's a well-known fact. Now, young people are already part of the climate protests, as we have been seeing across the world. So that needs to be enhanced and carried forward by the G20. So the 4 points: consumption, production, learning, and voices. Now, all these 4 points are in accordance with the life mission, or one word life, that Prime Minister Modi portrayed, put forward in the COP26. That brings me to the last one. What can Y20 under India's presidency do? First, to have a conference, a discussion of ideas on climate change, climate action, sustainable development, and formulate an action plan. Then a task force. Now, this task force will look into the implementation of the plan on ground in every possibly a G20 country, and try to implement the action plan, and then formulation of a climate lab, which will continuously monitor and also time and again innovate new modalities, new ways, and continuously innovate to ensure that our task force work properly. Thank you so much.
Before we move to the next speaker, please pay attention to the first rows. I'll raise my hand at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Next, we have Aishwarya Mhaske, a PhD research scholar in the Heritage Science and Society program at NIAS. She will be talking about the role of G20 and the youth in heritage as the field of research and as an active program.
Thank you. Me and my colleague Gaurav will be talking about heritage as one theme. I'll be dealing with what youth can do for heritage, and Gaurav will look into the G20 and the heritage. So to start with, I'll say that I'll be looking at this youth for heritage from 3 roles youth can play. One is as youth as an heritage enthusiast, the second is youth as a heritage expert, and then youth as a heritage custodian. So youth as an enthusiast can engage in more heritage awareness programs and volunteer to help professionals to protect heritage and create awareness. G20 can host inter-country level heritage awareness programs and training programs for youth. Youth can be an engine for a creative economy to develop their ideas and business models like Fab India, and to contribute to local as well as the global development and the prosperity. Youth as an heritage expert should engage more in developing methods, techniques, and technology by doing problem-oriented research to address the challenge of the field and to develop the space to create an interest, energy, and passion to address the questions such as heritage management, sustainable tourism, and local development and community involvement. Youth as a heritage custodians are responsible for protecting and preserving the heritage. So one should develop the sense of responsibility and belongingness towards the heritage. To start up with, youth can engage into a crowdsourcing where social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook can be used to report the vandalism. G20 as an international forum can have an international heritage association like ICOM and ICOMAS, as well as a student associations to raise awareness, to guide the policymaker, capacity building, and employment opportunities. Member states of G20 needs to be supported in elaborating and implementing the cultural policy measures and action plans, targeting youth to promote into participating in creative industries like heritage. Young minds' participation in policymaking process must also be supported. Promotion and preservation for heritage require a collaboration of various stakeholders, ranging from site management to local community, from heritage expert to the young volunteers. The work of young participants should be included in a bigger initiative involving various stakeholders, which can happen with the help of G20 community. I would like to conclude by saying that culture and heritage are our identities, and G20 as a community can provide a platform for youth of a different part of the world to come together to protect, preserve, conserve, and celebrate the diverse culture and heritage of humankind. Thank you.
Let us now hear from Gaurav Kumar Pal, a senior research fellow at NIAS. He will be talking about the involvement of heritage in G20 to open up space for research, collaborations, and management among the countries.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As the topic is mentioned, the discussion is based on research collaborations, conservation, management among the G20 countries so that heritage can be tuned into a resource as it should be. I will be talking about three major pointers. First is heritage research, second is conservation, and third is sustainable heritage management. For first heritage research, the first thing that needs to be done among the G20 countries is basically exchange research ideas, scientific tools, because there is a dearth of scientific tools that has been now it's been some time in research field, and there should be also a focus on utilizing indigenous methods that has been used by the communities. The second thing that we can do in research among G20 countries is that we can share share local history that has some sort of connected past among different countries. In this way, we can have a shared knowledge and information ease, which would be quite smooth for the students. The third is something which even NIAS might be involved, as Director Sir would know about NIAS heritage policy, and something like Netherlands has also done, which is a guest country in G20, and they have opened Mutual Heritage Atlas. So these are directories which are sort of resources which can be used for old maps or archival material or any such thing, and it could be conducted as an inter-country activity. The fourth thing on research is something which Aishwarya has already touched upon. It's based on funded student exchange programs and how students can thrive with the diverse cultures of different landscapes. Talking about the second major point is conservation. In the field of heritage, conservation is something which has always been lagged behind. If we talk about developed countries, they have quite a good collection of tools and scientific methodologies to revive their art objects, revive their buildings, but that exactly cannot be said about developing countries or countries like India, which often see certain gaps in these methodologies. So this is something G20 countries can sort of invest and look upon their resources and how they can come up with new technologies will be inclusive of their local communities, of their uh, localities, more involved in their localities. The third major point is management, heritage management, and how it incorporates sustainability tourism. Before coming on to that point, I'll want to tell you a point is that global out of it's basically out of all the global economy, 6% is based on culture, and of all the tourism economy globally, 40% is based on cultural tourism. So this is something very, it has a very strong economic impact, cultural heritage. And if we see the problems that are in India, urban spaces problem, disaster problems, human conflict, that are mostly in other G20 countries as well. If we look up around in Brazil actually they have quite a good intangible culture, but when it comes to their built heritage, their other problems, they don't have enough sufficient funding. So these are some things which we can look upon as G20 countries and see how we can go further into heritage and talking about it as a sustainable development. Thank you.
I'd like to call upon Athira Balakrishnan, a doctoral scholar from NIAS. She's working in the domain of human-wildlife conflict and the government policies concerning it. Today, her focus will be on wildlife conservation with a special emphasis on illegal activities like poaching, hunting, and trade.
Thank you, Avishka. Good afternoon, all. One of the sub-themes of this year's G20 summit is universal holistic health. And this was adopted in purview of the currently ongoing scenario of COVID-19. The diseases like HIV, Ebola, SARS, bird flu, and the latest COVID-19, all these viruses that caused major pandemics are identified as zoonotic by WHO, World Health Organization. And according to WHO, more than 70% of the infectious diseases that are affecting humans are transferred from wild animals. And zoonotic diseases means those diseases that are transferring from wild animals to human beings. And about most of the zoonotic diseases that we know are causing 2.2 million human deaths in a year in the world. So how does this transmission happen? It's through activities like poaching, consumption of wild meat, and trade of animal body parts for whatever reasons, and together with the unhygienic livestock industry, these are the major causes for transmission of such diseases. And one of the major reasons for conserving the wildlife, thus preventing the illegal wildlife trade, and to curb down and to cut down the markets for the trade, and is to curb down the zoonotic disease spill over from animals to human. And a study in 2017, it found that these emerging infectious diseases is found to be elevated in 3 kinds of places. Like 1, where the tropical forest regions are high, 2, where the mammal biodiversity is high, and 3, where they experience a land use changes. So countries of African, South American continents, and parts of India itself are all hotspots for this. It was for the first time then in 2020, when the world was in the middle of the pandemic, that a collective of world's 20 leading conservation organizations formed the Wildlife Conservation 20. They prompted the then G20 countries, and the summit was happening in Saudi Arabia. So they prompted the leaders to take up the urgent matter of biodiversity conservation for reducing the risks for future pandemics that are coming up. But unfortunately, the summits that followed, they only acknowledged that the nations will try to increase their commitment towards biodiversity protection, but no much mentioning was there on how they will go about it. So for this year's 2 of the many sub-themes, universal holistic health, as I mentioned before, and the second one, transitioning to sustainability, these both could be addressed by committing urgently to the issue of illegal wildlife trade and related activities like hunting and poaching. So what the G20 countries as a group can do for this? Since this is a problem at international scale, the issue of wildlife trafficking could only be brought down by national leaders coming together. And one way to make sure that is to make sure that the national level wildlife protection laws are in resonance with the international agreements and conventions for smoother implementation. The wildlife trafficking markets across are surviving purely on demand. So to cut down that demand, they need to work with the local people. So thus, a grassroots level stakeholder-centered policy planning is very much essential for prohibiting poaching and wildlife trade. What the youth can do about this is they have to use the effective science and communication systems for meeting the goals, and it is important to spread awareness amongst the common man. So conservation is a field that could be only achieved with the active participation of people on ground. We can't meet it with just research and policy framing. So to make sure that the researchers are mandatorily trained to communicate their works outside the academic committee should be brought about here. So to wrap it up, as this year's theme of G20 promotes a very relevant philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, let's not forget that the idea expands to all living forms across geographies so that we'll be able to save ourselves as a collective. Thank you.
Thank you, Athira. We now have Manpreet Kaur from Kristu Jayanti College, Bangalore. Her focus is on the potential for reshaping the tourism sector and developing a more suitable enterprise.
Good afternoon, all present here. So this year G20, which is led by India, has started a comprehensive calendar of G20 discussions under the theme of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. This underlines the growing importance of emerging economies in supporting globalism and leading international development cooperation, symbolizing how the focus of cooperation has shifted to the global south. In this regard, tourism industry is a major economic contributor and is growing in importance as the member countries strive for rapid economic recovery and job creation. It contributes to the preservation and improvement of the environment, cultural resources, customs, and history. Tourism provides social and cultural exchanges and aids in the decline of poverty, inequality, and backwardness. Therefore, what I think is industry needs to be properly focused and supported financially. While there is no question that number of intricate global challenges need to be resolved, the chance to showcase the economic potential as well as the heritage and culture is crucial. It is possible to connect industries and enhance the sustainable development through sustainable tourism. Looking at the G20 tourism track agenda, which is focused on 5 priority areas. Number 1 is green tourism for competitive, inclusive, and adaptable tourism sector. Second is digitalization for promoting social inclusion and sustainability. Third is skill training for youth employment and entrepreneurship. Fourth is nurturing small and medium enterprises and startups. And fifth is destination management for strategic planning of destinations with a balanced approach. Rebuilding the tourism sectors offers the opportunity to remodel it and create a sustainable industry. With unified public and private initiatives, the industry should lead a shift to a green economy as nations recover. Also giving social security to those who are employed in the sector, particularly women, young people, and migrants, who make up the majority of the tourism workforce, must be the focus of any initiative to strengthen travel and tourism businesses. For tourism sector, the impact of greater gender equality and women empowerment would be highly beneficial because diverse and gender equitable organization performs better. And let me conclude by saying that students and young people have a duty to foster discussion and actions on issues of scale. It is time to promote sustainable tourism, provide local communities with employment possibilities, foster international goodwill and understanding, raise environment consciousness, and safeguard the natural and cultural heritages of the host nation. These exchanges and encounters with foreign delegation will set the groundwork for a long-term and mutually beneficial connection among young people from all over the G20 countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Manpreet. Gowri Dixit will be focusing on a collective approach to bring skill enhancement of the youth in G20. She's a final year student of MA Public Policy at Ramaiah University.
Thank you, Avishka. Good afternoon, everyone. One Earth, One Family, and One Future is the theme of G20 this time. So while talking about youth becomes the most important aspect to be discussed. So youth and development. When we look at youth and development, there are two sides to it. The first being youth development itself and youth for development. This is also the focus of the draft Youth Policy 2022. So when we're looking at youth development, we are concentrating on equipping our youth to be capable and reliable to lead from the front for the 21st century needs. So when we're talking about youth development, one of the imperatives here will be skill development. Skill development, when we're looking at it, has been the imperative of G20 summits over a long period of time. So why are we going to discuss skill development here is also because we'll be looking at fourth industrial revolution that is materializing currently. And when we're looking at the G20 countries, we can classify them into two parts. The first part being, I will call them skill advanced countries. And the second part, I will call them as skill advancing countries. So my suggestion here is that for a collective future, these two kinds and under the G20 platform could come together to form an ideation center that will have both young minds and experienced minds involving in a problem-solving mode to innovate for the future, where we will also be looking at skill enhancement and technology transfer. At the time when India is at the chair of G20, the nation has a new education policy that is coming up that also looks at youth as an asset, that looks at youth development as an imperative for development. And also we have our youth policy that is putting into perspective what the youth can do for the society. I think we are at the right place to be thinking about something like this, where all the countries together can come and innovate for future. So talking about NEP 2020 particularly, and in the perspective of G20, which also has a working group on education, I would say internationalization of education is something that can be utilized here, and through which we can be looking at foreign universities set up campuses here, and India can act as a host for other G20 countries to come over, have their ideation centers, where we will host all the G20 members to learn certain particular skills. With a special emphasis in this given time can also be given on value-based skill imparting, because future just doesn't align with skill development and skilling, but it also will align with just means of achieving the right future for the global good. Thank you.
Thank you, Gowri. Let's now hear from Apoorva Sudhakar, a research associate at NIAS. Her focus will be on peace and peace-building measures in the G20.
Thank you, Avishka. Good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I express my gratitude to the MEA, RIS, NIAS, and our partner institutions for having me as a panelist at the G20 University Connect, which gives young people the space to bring out ideas and ambitions, especially at a time when India holds the presidency. Thank you for the opportunity. Moving on to the discussion for today, I would begin by outlining a few developments that took place in the recent past. First and foremost, as I talk about peace, one of the the highlight of the issue is the seemingly increasing number of conflicts, be it in Ukraine or the fallouts of it in other parts of the world, or the various other environmental challenges and protests for gender rights and so on. However, there have also been positive developments which may not have made it to the news. These could range from major ceasefires like the one signed in Ethiopia, or resolution of bilateral conflicts, or even conflicting parties coming together at the same table to initiate talks, or community level initiatives such as encouraging peace schools along disputed borders. We mostly study history as a collection of wars, often forgetting that civilization and humankind have moved forward on the foundations and trails of peace. And this is exactly why we as G20 members should pursue peace as an agenda and not a subsidiary of harmony or prosperity. For the agenda, various themes that we may begin with can keep in line with the UN's goals of peace building, preventive diplomacy, and peacekeeping. As a starter, I propose a G20 peace conference wherein we invite diplomats, community leaders, and civil society organizations from across the member countries. Here, we can exchange the best practices on peace building that we as countries have implemented in our regions as well. In this way, we can learn the nuances of peace building, the differences among ourselves, and how to embrace the same instead of exploiting them. Second, as a young member of the society, I propose that we have a youth peace innovators platform. We at NIAS have already launched such a platform, the activities of which will begin shortly. The idea here is to bring together youth who are involved in peace building, which necessarily does not deal with only armed conflict. We look at youth who address gender inequality, youth who are environmentally conscious, and youth who are committed to the community. They can come together, share ideas, share their success and failures so that we learn what went right and what went wrong. Lastly, let me highlight that as of October 2022, all G20 members have over 16,000 peacekeepers stationed across the world. Therefore, I propose that just like peacekeepers, we also have an exchange among the member countries of peace observers who research on peace, who are on ground with the community workers, and who can also help in capacity building and building early warning systems on factors that may disrupt peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Apoorva. Next, we have Abigail Miriam Fernandez, a research associate at NIAS. She will be expanding the focus on a very important aspect, gender.
Thank you, Avishka. Good afternoon, all. I would like to begin by thanking the Government of India, RIS, and NIAS for giving me this opportunity and the youth of our country this platform of the G20 University Connect. My focus of today's discussion is on gender. In this regard, the G20 summits have constantly expanded their focus on gender equality across various dimensions and also have taken up many numerous commitments. So far, the G20 has taken up over 60 commitments on gender equality, and in this regard has about 59% of compliances in these several commitments. At the start, gender commitments focused on increasing female labor force participation, improving workplace conditions, ensuring the digital gap comes down, and it also looked into committing to an end of gender-based violence. Particularly in 2020, the G20 also recognized the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women and committed to ensuring that it would not widen inequalities and undermine the progress made in the recent past. However, the point that I would like to make here is that the G20's gender focus ends with the discussion on women. While this in itself is a great commendable effort, the G20 must expand its focus beyond women to the larger gender spectrum. Thus, for this purpose, to implement gender mainstreaming, the G20 would have to work towards reframing and strengthening inclusive policies, recognizing the importance of political initiatives, addressing the systemic issues, including the data gaps, the digital divide, and also look into the gender budgeting at not just to women, but also to the larger gender spectrum. And an initiative to promote this at the youth level is what I would like to propose as what I call it as the gender sensitization dialogue for the youth by the youth. Now, there is a need to create a culture of continuous dialogue and mutual understanding among the youth to become these champions of gender inequality. The G20 can implement a forum to promote such dialogues in the format of the W20 or the Y20 that already exists, where youth leaders are given a platform to spread awareness and bring out initiatives to promote gender mainstreaming in society. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. Now calling upon Reon George, an MBA student at Kristu Jayanti College, who will be talking about sustainable HR practices in the G20 member countries in order to ensure the long-term success of their economies and societies.
First of all, warm greetings to one and all present here. It gives me immense pleasure to interact with you guys. So there are several issues which the G20 focuses on and discusses. And all these issues are concentrating on one factor. Can anybody name it? It is, can anyone try? Only on one factor. Most of these issues revolve around one factor. It is the people. Today, sustainability is the need of the hour. And sustainability in terms of human resources is what the G20 nations should take into consideration. The sustainable HR practices are laid on a basic foundation, a model called the triple bottom line approach. The triple bottom line approach was started in the year 1994, but it popularized during the year 2014. The triple bottom line focuses on the three aspects, three P's. One is people, another one is planet, and profits. So how can we use this model to help the countries and make a productive and a sustainable human resource? First, the aim of people here is to get a global opportunities, create more opportunities, not only for the internal community or the institutions, but overall in a holistic view. Second point is the planet. When we come in terms of planet, our institutions focus on a major aspect called the CSR initiatives. But CSR is something which is very internal and it just concentrates only on the few aspects of the surroundings. But when you talk about sustainability versus the CSR, CSR means, to put it across in simple terms, CSR is like giving a fish to a man, and sustainability is making the man to know how to fish. So the third aspect where I talk about the profits need to be very ethical. Why ethical? Because when you have a system where a lot of where people get more opportunities, when everything grows, automatically organizations tend to focus on ethical practices. And few suggestions which I would like to give to the G20 nations is promote and provide opportunities for the gig economy workers. Now, this is a latest concept which has been evolving. Gig economy workers. I know that there are few aspects where few institutions say that this can't be taken into consideration because there is no regulation. But I put it across these G20 countries so that we can regulate these gig economy workers and provide and create more opportunities for people. And then introduce a metaverse system. Metaverse is something where people get into and work in a virtual system. So the metaverse concept here works is, see, in online media, we tend to interact with people, but we don't have that physical connect. So when we go into metaverse, the connection is more, we get in more diverse, equity, and inclusive people. All these aspects are concentrated in metaverse. So I would like to conclude by saying that we all, as the theme says, one earth, one family, and one future. Let us all concentrate on the human aspect because that is the need of the hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Reon. Kruthika Reddy from Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences will be focusing on the role of the youth as ambassadors for collective policy interventions.
Good afternoon to all the young minds present here. So India, holding the presidency of G20 in its turn, is looking at spreading the importance of youth at the global forum. The country has started with its implementation of National Education Policy 2020
and released the draft Youth Policy 2022 to its public. So, according to National Education Policy 2020, the aim of education will not only be cognitive development, but also building character and creating holistic and well-rounded individuals which are equipped with key 21st century skills. So, holistic development to unlock the potential of the youth is the aim of the draft National Youth Policy, and G20 platform is one such where ideas are transmitted across borders. So, the energy of the youth must be used by the nations to catalyze their aim towards peaceful, sustainable, and to promote the idea of oneness. Promoting youth as global citizens working together to bring global workable solutions for global common issues must be at the forefront. One such way is appointing youth ambassadors, probably from students studying in foreign universities, to promote cultural and value-based ecosystem that India is always known for, which both NEP 2020 and the draft youth policy talks about. So peace-building efforts through youth ambassadors is in a global situation where conflicts are recurring is very much essential. So youth ambassadors can act as bridges to build relations among countries, that is the people-to-people connect, track 3 diplomacy, must involve the appointed youth ambassadors to shape the world that the youth is going to inherit. So youth ambassadors in promoting healthy living through food consumption across countries for a healthy world is something that the G20 platform could look into. Youth can act as India's belief, that is the national good and the global good can exist harmoniously. So thank you.
Thank you, Kruthika. We now have Rishika Bhattacharya from Kristu Jayanti College. She will be focusing on the leading environmental issues related to coastal sustainability.
It's an honor to be here today to speak on the topic that is of great importance to us all and is a rising environmental issue which needs immediate attention: coastal sustainability and pollution related to it. The G20 summit provides opportunity for leaders from around the world to come together and discuss challenges which we face and work towards finding solutions that will benefit us all. And this G20 has already touched this agenda of coastal issues, coastal sustainability, and has given its solutions on it by holding its first meeting on 2019 on blue economy. In 2018, they have already discussed about marine plastic litter and macroplastics, in which they aim in reducing the amount of plastics which enter into the oceans. And they have also talked about sustainable fishing. I believe over extraction is also an upcoming threat, which is extremely harming the coastal areas, and it needs immediate attention. So if G20 could focus on over extraction by setting certain limits about the amount of resources that can be extracted from the ocean each year, and which will prevent over extraction. Of course, this quota, this amount will be based on the number of the reproductive rate of the species, and about the resources which also can be sustainably harvested. G20 can also focus on designating areas as protected, which will help to conserve those over-extracted areas. This can include marine parks, conservation areas, and no-take zones where fishing, extraction, and development should completely be restricted. I believe that there are many people already working, who are not part of any G20 or any NGOs, already working about coastal sustainability, like Jadav Payeng, who is a conservationist from Assam, and who planted trees around the banks of the Brahmaputra river. So planting trees can also be a way of dealing with coastal sustainability and the coastal erosion and land degradation. And youths can definitely take a lead role by promoting the same through social media and through campaigns. campaigns and acts which really go viral in the social media prove to reach more people day by day, and they can be the best and the most effective method to reach out to more and more people. And planting wind and salt tolerant plants along the coast can help in a lot many ways other than increasing the scenic beauty, like they help in preventing coastal erosion and all. I have another fisherwoman who has an inspiring story about practicing sustainable fishing practices. And so G20 can also look forward to imparting the same to women and involving women in their activities. I feel interactive installations along the coastal areas can turn out to be the solution to the problem of coastal sustainability. Student can volunteers to maybe put up some pop-up exhibits or interactive artboards or posters which can turn into memorable experience and drive engagement among the other people who come there for a visit. Using virtual reality technology, which is gaining importance in the youngsters in the recent age, can also create immersive experiences that stimulate the impacts of global warming on the sea level rise, which is also harmful to the coastal areas. Overfishing is also an issue which has already been touched by the G20. And hence, I would like to conclude by saying that it is clear that coastal sustainability is a critical issue that demands our attention and action. But the youngsters of upcoming generations, that is us, we can move forward and take the lead by promoting through the social media, Instagram, Twitter, and address the challenges of the coastlines and oceans and work together towards a sustainable future for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishika. Next, we have Harini Madhusudan, a doctoral scholar at NIAS. She will be addressing common challenges and cooperation in the space domain.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here to discuss outer space, a subject that I've been working on for the past few years. In the G20 setup, S20 was set up. S20 started only in 2020. This was a meeting on the sidelines of G20 summit. It was called the Space Economy Leaders Meeting. Further, this meeting also includes a space industry leaders meeting. So there are two forms of meeting that goes on in the space domain. In 2023, according to the Indian G20 agenda, the Space Economy Leaders Meeting is expected to discuss how the space partnerships can contribute to the growth of G20 economy while ensuring sustainability. So we're looking at growth and sustainability in the space economy. And in this context, it is important to note that the outer space in this decade, starting from 2020 itself, will observe massive economic investments that go into the space industry, innovations, a lot of problem-solving technology, and also has brought forth the dialogue on responsible behavior and the sustainable use of outer space. So G20 could lead the dialogue on specifically lunar space. This is considering that the members of G20 are participants on all the three extremes of their moon ambitions. So one is either they have signed the Artemis Accords, or they are on the China-Russia bloc, or there are countries that are not sure or have significant skepticisms of the use of moon resources. So G20 would be a perfect platform to initiate dialogue on the future of human exploration, not just of the moon, but also further the other planets. In line with also the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals of 2030s, outer space is often seen as an enabler of sustainable development on terrestrial Earth. However, the time is ripe to discuss the sustainability in outer space itself, on how the crowding, the traffic in outer space, the debris is managed, and all of these domains. So G20 would be another perfect platform to discuss these issues. Common standards and values in topics such as space situational awareness is likely to further encourage data sharing among countries And if this is done again in the G20 domain, early warning, launch notification mechanisms can all be established among countries with common developmental goals. The 2020s have seen the emergence of myriad space tech industries and its allied services that have come forth as startups. And these startups have been working on some of the most innovative and problem-solving technologies like debris removal, in-orbit servicing, and some of these are led by the youngsters themselves. So these technologies are redefining the space industry as we speak. Hence, the space as an agenda in G20 would essentially also have to initiate dialogues on space situational awareness, responsible behavior, space traffic management, debris mitigation, keeping in mind that the outer space is vital to the national development, while also encouraging cooperation and coordination among G20 members in outer space. Thank you.
Thank you, Harini. I'd now like to call upon Padmashree Anandhan, a research associate at NIAS. She will be focusing on ocean governance and contributing to the global initiatives taken towards ocean conservation.
Thank you, Avishka. I thank the Government of India and the G20 initiative for giving me this opportunity. Today, I have divided my inputs into 3 questions. One is what has been achieved so far in the G20s on the maritime domain? And second, what have been the gaps? And thirdly, what G20 this year can do or how India can take lead in the ocean governance? To start with my first question, what has been achieved so far? In the previous G20 summits, let it be the 2010 or the 2014, they have looked into maritime from the security and the transport aspects. And when it comes to the last 2 summits, which have kind of tried to bring in the ocean agenda on a broader theme, the one that took place in Italy summit, they have tried to focus on bringing the cooperation at the regional seas level. And for the G20 that took place in Bali, they launched the Ocean 20, which most prioritized on the economic aspect, looking into spurring investments and growth in the ocean economy and keeping restoration and regeneration of ocean health as a secondary aspect. So what have been the gaps in the G20s that have happened? One is the missing focus. The missed focus on the ocean conservation, maritime ecosystem, and seeing ocean as a living being, and comparing to the initiatives that are taken by France, let it be the One Ocean Summit or the UN's initiative to establish the Ocean Treaty and the Small Island Developing States call for global moratorium ban on deep sea mining. These have been the missed focus that could be incorporated into the current G20. To give an example, let's say for the deep sea mining, there's been a lot of cost factor when it comes to investing into the machines and the extraction and exploration of the minerals process. So comparing the cost factor and the implications to the marine environment needs to be analyzed. The second factor that I'd like to bring your attention to is on the research level. So far, let it be India, the maritime security, the transport, the trade routes, the technical expertise have been on high. Let it be at the academic level, the education level, and at the think tank level. There's been a lot of focus on looking at the security aspects. But in terms of ocean conservation, marine biodiversity, there's been way less, which has actually not helped us at the policy level. So what can be done? What G20 can do, or how India can take lead in this aspect? First is the instilling of the concept of one ocean. The perspective and the idea of one ocean and maritime conservation has to be kept at the center, and then it must be allowed to evolve and expand the technological advancements, maritime routes, and human activities. And second, how India can act as a leader for the global south. Some of the major trends we could see is South Asia is the major contributor in terms of fisheries sectors, maritime tourism, and those who are involved in the maritime activities or the ecosystem services belong to the poor livelihoods. Therefore, India can actually take forward the One Ocean initiative at the global south, uniting South Asia, the regional seas, and since our contribution mostly comes from the bottom, a bottom-up approach to establish a global South Ocean governance, India has the best possibility to establish that. My last point is on involvement of the youth aspect. So it becomes necessary to involve the youth when it comes to the maritime conservation. So it does not bind to the digital or the technological or technical aspects, but for creating a knowledge base and a capacity building for sustainable future, it would be best to target the ocean science concept and capacity building from the school level. And this would also help in aligning with the SDG 14 and UNESCO's 2030 target on bringing the capacity development in ocean science at the academic level. So India can take this forward along with the universities at the higher education and think tanks to meet the gap at the policy and ocean governance. For example, I would like to highlight our NIAS maritime studies, where we are looking at the policy front, and we are in tie with the Indian Maritime University, which looks into the technical aspects. So such collaborations across India and the G20 countries would help us nurture the maritime conservation. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Padmashree. MC Lalrotluanga from Kristu Jayanti College will be talking about uplifting recycling industries amongst the G20 countries.
Warm greetings to everyone. Good afternoon to all. It is my privilege to stand here and to deliver a talk on a topic which is very important in today's world. Uplifting of recycling industries among the G20 nations is a beneficiary for every country which comes under G20 and overall global economy. So first, I would like to point out the problems of recycling industries and what have been done by the G20 countries and what we can do as youth or as government or as global institutions. While I was going through the agendas of these international organizations like G20 and WTO and any other international organization, what I have been finding out is that there is a difference between what is there in the documents and what is actually happening in the business world. The economic model which we are following, we are trying to follow, that is the circular economy. There is a conflict between our current business practice and our consumption pattern and our lifestyle practices. So it is extremely important to highlight the importance of recycling industries among these G20 nations. If we look into the data, the recycling rate of South Asia is 5%, and our open dumping rate is 75%, and our landfill dumping rate is 4%. If we look into the other parts of the world, Middle East and North Africa, their recycling rate is 9%, Europe and Central Asia is 20%, and the sub-Saharan African countries are 6.6%. So it is extremely low, like comparing to the goals which we set for the SDG 2030. So I will point out few countries from G20 which are underperforming. Mexico is underperforming, where only 1% of their whole produced plastic goods are recycled. So what can we actually do about this? I believe that inclusion of investment in social infrastructure through education and engagement of youth through these G20 engagement groups like Startup 20, Think 20, or Urban 20 is very important for these recycling industries to be introduced among the G20 nations. There are a lot of nations which does not have the platform to recycle their plastic waste, and there are many nations who are suffering from policies like they don't have proper waste management system at all. Many countries are trying to adapt to the best possible waste management system, but it is still failing because it is the grassroots which is important. We have to focus first on education. Like if we look at the surplus track of G20, we have education, employment, environment, and climate sustainability. So reviving or introducing of recycling industries among the G20 nations is under this surplus track too, like if we think rationally. And there are a few of my suggestions which I have to point out. Then first is life sciences or students' unions, which will be focusing on recycling industries. where students can play a major role directly. They have to conclude or conduct frequent meetings at international level, district level, and state level. And G20 countries should also invest on scientific research institutes and to focus on new possible output of recycled goods. And we have to adopt new methodology and collaborating them with academic institutions to test through these lifestyle cells. And we have to empower the committees which are currently working under the NGOs or SHGs, which are currently working under the G20. We have to adopt the bottom-up approach instead of the top-down approach. Investing on social infrastructure, which I've already mentioned, and we have to stress on investment of education by bringing change in curriculum, not in the form of only theory papers. We have to focus on vocational course, on waste management, recycling methodology, which comes along with it, and implying knowledge and skills on recycling waste among the youth. And we have to invest a lot on MSME, which comes under the priority of the G20. It is true MSME is now, it has becoming a relevant topic, but the thing is that we have to extract recycling industries from this MSME and we have to focus particularly on it. And we have to frame legal framework which is a mandate and not vogue. If we look back into the 2017 meeting in Germany, which has the Osaka G20 framework for the climate change and the climate sustainability and environment economics, it is just a framework which is voluntary and that is why it failed. So we need a strong legal framework under which G20 countries can come together and form mandate framework or which might act as a treaty. And finally, we need the implementation of AI, and we need young minds to train their knowledge, and we need to train ourselves to adapt to the coming challenges of the future, which are caused by this improper waste management. And we have to adapt to the skills like knowledge on AI and what can AI do in the coming future. So the successive program of uplifting recycling industries in nations will bring employment opportunities for millions of people, which is for sure. And it will directly contribute to the economy, and it will be beneficiaries for the developing countries as well. So with that, I will conclude by saying that another man's trash is another man's treasure. Thank you.
Thank you, MC. Next, we have Shannan Saravanan from Kristu Jayanti College, who will be focusing on priorities, challenges, actions, and cultural trafficking.
Thank you, Avishka. This is my honor and privilege to be here. So today I'll be focusing on three main aspects: how culture and heritage has become the focal point in the recent years, the two main priorities of the G20 and how they are working in the youth involvement, and how the G20 has been working to combat cultural trafficking. For the first time in history, on July 30th, the ministers of culture from the G20 group of the world's top nation came to an agreement on a G20 declaration on culture that firmly establishes culture as a key catalyst for a long-term socio-economic recovery. It comprises the protection of cultural heritage, culture and climate change, culture and education, culture and creative industry, and culture in the digital transaction. These are the five main priorities. The addition of culture is a reflection of the G20 meeting, gradual expansion to include a broader global perspective on current societal challenges in recent years. So the two main priorities which I'll be focusing on is protection of cultural heritage, that is the importance of cultural legacy for identity, social cohesion, peace and security, which was emphasized by the G20 ministers of culture. Threats to cultural and intellectual property include theft and illegal trade, misuse of indigenous peoples, cultural heritage, and traditional knowledge, unchecked urban development. And the second priority which we'll be focusing on is culture and education, is the ways in which culture and education can come together and develop knowledge and new abilities. So basically to encourage employment development, especially in the young people, spending on education, training and awareness training was highlighted. In addition, they acknowledge the importance of heritage, education and all the other institutes like the conservation centers, universities, indigenous communities and other cultural institutions where innovation and intersectoral convergence across science, technology, arts and humanities can be there. The main focus is to involve the youth in this institution to make a difference at the global level. When we talk about the cultural trafficking part, many of the archaeologists are unable to learn about the past when ancient artifacts are stolen and the location were there buried and destroyed by looting. So, among the difficulties, the G20 has been attempting to resolve are cultural property trafficking, which has been combated, and the procedures and measures put in place to ensure and defend cultural assets in emergency situations and disasters. The key message from the launch of the G20 culture works these days in the culture. Heritage have a transforming capacity for the restoration of our economies and our society, which has been severely damaged because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Culture and heritage can help us navigate the green and digital transaction, encourage the change that is necessary to combat climate change, and serve as a cornerstone for a real recovery. We must collaborate to develop safeguards for cultural treasures in nations experiencing or recently recovering from the violence, the corruption that makes it possible for cultural items to be trafficked and laundered must also be eradicated by the nation through the introduction of the new Global E Network for Law Enforcement Collaboration, UNODC, and the G20 have already collaborated successfully on combating corruption. According to me, based on what I have researched, I've come to a conclusion that the G20 needs to take quick action like to combat illegal trafficking of cultural property, harmonize regulation and law enforcement, create a new task force at UNESCO request to guard cultural heritage during emergency, strengthen the position of culture in global climate action for the safeguarding of cultural assets, adopt and put into practice worldwide principles on climate change impact, prioritize spending on technical and vocational education for job involving culture, including official and informal settings, to prepare workers for the ecological and digital transformation, especially the young youths, which will make a big difference in the aspects of ecology and digital transformation. Lastly, improve online access to cultural, protect the linguistic and cultural variety of online content, especially through the control of the online space. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Lastly, we have Tarun Kumar from Kristu Jayanti College. His emphasis is on protection of children.
Hello everyone. I'm pleasure to introduce myself. I'm Tarun Kumar from Kristu College of Autonomous. Today I'll be speaking about G20 on topic Unite for Children. I want G20 to take it into consideration and take immediate actions for this. From our previous summits, G20 leaders started Save the Children concept. Yet the question is arised to children sustainability and the protection and the future. The world has failed to sufficiently protect the children. In the age where they should dance in the rain and wonder about rainbows and sunshine, minors are being raped. Cybercrimes against the children are increasing day by day. Psychological abuses against the children are not even noticed in the present scenario. This makes me question myself. If we call our children the future, what future are we going towards? In today's world, what are the problems that children are facing? There are many children who are starving without proper nutrition. There are cases rising on malnutrition, obesity. There are diseases that are like children are the victims of the diseases where prone to cancer, diabetes, and obesity, and chronic kidney disease, neglected tropical diseases. Children are at risk of highly sexual violences. Children are being raped in silence. The thing is that truth can be denied, but not avoided. Yeah. Here, I want G20 and the youths to contribute in one part. We all must have walked on the lush grass, drenched with the morning dew. We must have admired open skies full of stars, birds soaring high, rustling of leaves, forest filled with chirping beings, honeybees hurling from one flower to another, lakes filled with lotuses, chicks from the nest calling out of their bird parents. This is what the children of today and the children of future must see, must experience. But will they? At last, the initiatives and the ideas that I've come up with that youth and the G20 can take up, and the contributors, youth should be taught about scientific communication inquiry, and they be embedded with the research institute. Youth should learn behind the books and industrial visits. Visits to laboratories and medical sites should be promoted during the primary schools. Sexual abuse and sexual violence awareness among the youth should be mandatory. More resilient education systems, creating a healthy digital ecosystem for children by youths. I grew up hearing the present generation represent the future. If you want the future children to be safe and sound, if you want to see your children and grandchildren healthy and happy, so I suggest the present generation and the upcoming generation must be educated well. Therefore, the organizations, the leaders, and the committee members and the elders must work together as one. As our motto of this year summit says, one family, one earth, and one future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun, and thank you to all the speakers, all the young speakers, for sharing their thoughts on what the G20 can do for the youth and what the youth can do for the G20. We have now heard from all of the speakers in the panel, and we can now open the floor for questions and comments from the young students in the audience. I request you to kindly raise your hand, and my colleague will pass a mic to you. After that, we can get back to the panel for their response to your questions. Yes, I think we have one question from Mysore University over there.
Hello, everyone. Does it work? Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Ruhul Ali. I'm from Afghanistan, and currently I'm pursuing my master degree in international relations from Mysore University. So we have talked about G20 countries, that what they should do in order to be successful, and we have discussed many issues related to G20. But we have forgot about one of the most important issues, that is global terrorism. What G20 countries must do under India leadership to tackle global terrorism, which is a pressing challenge for international security. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Renuka Hiremad. I'm a research scholar at Vishweshwara Technology University. Firstly, I would like to thank Ministry of External Affairs, RIS and NIAS for providing this opportunity and a platform where we can interact and share our views. It is an honor that during Amrit Kal, our country has received the glorious opportunity to host the largest ever multilateral event. The world is looking at India with pride, and I'm sure as youth we are the cultural ambassadors and should lead collectively the India from the front. I have narrowed down my views into three. Firstly, as to promote lifestyle for environment is one of the priorities for G20 India presidency. And India has taken global initiative of one sun, one world and one grid. And it has also pledged to achieve net zero emission by 2070. In this regard, Indian youth need to become the climate warriors and motivate others to participate in the mission to save planet Earth. There has been focus on sustainable environment and usage of renewable energy as well as reduction of fossil fuels. But there needs to be focus on e-waste and also for wetland restoration. Secondly, as India strives towards its 100 years of independence, it is committed to resolve Make in India for the world. And this we have seen in the recent inauguration of the industrial corridor from Chennai to Bangalore, and in the inauguration of the largest helicopter manufacturing at Tumkuru. I hope this will provide more opportunities for youth to involve in bridging the gap between the developed nations and the developing nations. And thirdly, I would like to mention that there have been tensions in Indo-Pacific region and at the borders. So there is a challenge to India to balance its maritime security as well as to balance the multilateral relations. By finding a ways to overcome this, I'm sure we can effectively implement our motto of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And we have set a very good example by handling the COVID pandemic situation very well. And I'm sure India will do the same in future. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start from my left at the back. If anybody has a question there. Okay. Anybody on the left?
Good evening to one and all. I am Harish Rayaji from Mysore University. India being besides fifth largest economy, fifth or sixth largest military, world's largest democracy, has a great deal of soft power because of its deep-rooted culture and heritage and unity in diversity. So, how can India project its soft power by developing tourism sector on a large scale? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with you.
Good morning. My name is Manojaya Devilli. I'm a first year BA student from Kristu Jayanti College. So I have a few questions, more like stupid questions, but yeah, these have been roaming around my mind. So my first one is regarding cultural heritage, which we've seen trafficking or poaching of cultural relics. So what do you think about this, and what has colonization done to affect these? That's my first question. And then my second question is for the space challenges and cooperation, where there are private entities like SpaceX, patronized by Elon Musk, that has said that by 2025 I have an aim to send people onto Mars, and the clock is ticking, or like by 2050 we will be at least 1 million colonizing Mars or something like that. So yeah, I want to know the view of that. And also the race for finding Earth 2.0 and many planets in the habitable zone and finding alien life. So what is the perspective of G20 on this? What takes are they doing this? Are they collaborating or not? And yeah, regarding sustainability, what effects are all of these, my previous questions, what effects do they have on the sustainability of the world? And what are the current happenings having an effect, or what is G20 discussing about those activities?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Raju, faculty from Department of Economics, Jayanti College Autonomous. The thing is, today we are speaking about sustainable development. That's a mantra of today as a part of G20 session. But here when we introduce on the words to sustainable development, for example, production of electric vehicles. Again, there are side effects as lithium, e-waste. What about Russo-Ukraine war? What about China? China people, they will have to work 24/7 by 365 days. Otherwise, people they die out of unemployment. So, world is somewhat burning out of all these problems. At the same time, it is contradictory, I think, how it's possible to attain, sustainable development without causing any kind of damage to existing climate, environment. And already America has gone out of, Paris Summit. America knows in the name of, developing nations, India and China, they are, they are gaining all the benefits. So what are the solutions exactly? Practically, we could speak a number of things. Empirically, how to attain this? Thank you.
The student on the row 5.
Good afternoon to everyone. So one of the panelists talked about the task force, if I'm not wrong. So what kind of task force we are talking about here? And will it be like a specific country will take will take part of it, or like whole collaboration will be there? And someone also talked about the media to use a report of vandalism, right? So what about the media manipulation we have right now? And if I'm not wrong, Gaurav also talk about digging on the history of history, right, to protect our history, right? So what about those most of the G20 countries have been victim of colonialism. So what about that will it affect those kind of like pursue? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joanne, and I'm from MA Economics, Kristu Jayanti College Autonomous. So, as the major theme of G20 is also youth empowerment. But along with youth empowerment, like you all talked about skill development, like reskilling, upskilling, and all sort of way that we can, bring up the youth of our generation. But at the same time, The greatest pandemic that the youth is facing right now is unemployment. And how is the G20 facing unemployment or an issue of job security? Because I guess nowadays, especially in times where life is insecure, when it comes to inflation or recession, job security is a huge priority. So how does the G20 or the countries within the G20 ensure that? Thank you.
Yes, we can go with one last question.
Hello everyone. Am I audible? Hello everyone. I'm Rithanya from University of Mysore, studying MA in International Relations. So when we focus on the rural population of a country, migration of rural population towards the urban is in search of employment is major cause for loss of rural livelihood. On the other hand, this leads to overpopulation in urban areas. This creates competition in the employment sector of urban population. This is also the reason for declining rates of agriculture practices in the country. So how is G20 going to work about it? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to the panel for the response to the questions posed by the audience. There were a few questions on climate change, on heritage, and on illegal trade and poaching. So I think maybe we can start with the panel. Rashmi?
Thank you. I will first answer the question on the task force. What kind would be the task force? Definitely a youth-led one, and as I mentioned in my talk also, it will be a force that will be implementing the action plan that was discussed previously in a dialogue, and it would be beneficial. It would if it is there in every G20 country. It would be more beneficial if it will be inclusive in terms of representing all sections of the population of that particular country. One thing would be the task forces kind of exchanging their ideas within the G20 countries itself, the different task forces exchanging, and then going back and probably addressing the gaps and seeing how much the action plan has been, how much action plan had proposed and what has been achieved on ground. Yeah. So the other one was on sustainable development. How sustainable development can be attained without further damage. Sir, I think the answer lies in innovative production. We are trying to see new technologies about how sustainably we can go forward in our living. However, some innovative production can also ensure that those gaps are filled and further no harm is caused in terms of well, I'm not sure about the lithium and other things, but I guess considering the harm while we already are producing new technologies is an important thing. Yeah, I guess that's it from myself.
Panelists to kindly be brief. We'll move to Aishwarya Mhaske.
Thank you. I think that was on illegal antiquity trafficking, which I think Shannan will be addressing, and the other was for the Gaurav, which came about digging into the shared history of the G20 communities. Vandalism and social media, when I talked about it, I majorly focused on reporting vandalism through social media. There are a lot of social media pages which are controlled by various government agencies and NGOs. So youth, wherever go out for cultural trails and exploring the heritage, can take up pictures and upload the vandalism that has caused to the monuments, which will bring attention of agencies to take care of the monuments. So basically that was it. I think I'll over it to Shannan on cultural antiquity trafficking.
The question on poaching, it was what to do about it. I thought the question was Yeah, so my suggestions were one, what the nations, G20 nations can do was, since this is an international thing, it could be only addressed in an international way. Like sites, for example, I mentioned that nations can try to bring in their own national policies in tandem with what are the international agreements are. For example, the CITES, it exists for curbing down the international uh, illegal trafficking of wild animals. But for example, in India's case, the Wildlife Protection Act that exists here, it didn't have any of the exotic animals under the protected list. So what we did was, in the recent amendment of that act in 2021, we tried to bring in all these exotic animals under that. So only after that we are now able to curb down this exotic animal trade in India. Before that, even though we signed the CITES convention, we were not able to. So the nations can try to bring in that their policies are in tandem with the international ones. And also what the youngsters can do is try to take up the science and communication very seriously, because all the research and policy making, it won't help with the conservation. I mean, conservation is something that happens in the field, and local people also will have to participate together with us. So it is something that the science and communication in a proper way, the youngsters will have to take it out to the field. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. I think we can end the discussion here. What I'd request the panelists to do is please engage with the students who are here in the audience, maybe after the session ends. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists and the audience and the dignitaries present here today. I now hand the floor back to Professor Subhachandran. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Avishka. I think Avishka should be given a special award. 90 minutes, 16 speakers under discussion. I think should be a Guinness Book of World Record kind of. You managed it really well, Avishka, but my notes are also there. Thank you. Thank you, Avishka. Just as a way to quickly summarize, you heard today, it's almost like I could since we are creating slogans, one earth, one family, I think this is something like a by the youth, for the youth, and of the youth kind of a discussion. I think we are immensely proud of what we did in the last 90 minutes. I'm sure when the director speak to us, he will also agree with me completely. This is one of its kind in this lecture hall that we had in the last few years. Look at the subject that we have dealt with, from space to maritime, from climate to heritage, from HR to poaching. I think we have covered a huge area. I think we should take pride in the way we covered those themes. But more than what we covered, the intensity and the quality of those discussions. It's just not that we picked up random subjects and then came. I think all of you had a point. I think if we have to go through the recording, I'm sure each one of you brought something to the table. I think that is something unique. I thought it's not only what we covered in terms of quantity, but also what we brought in terms of quality. So it is not only the subject that we covered, but also the quality of the discussion. I thought that was immense. The third, the brevity. You all took 3 minutes. It's not easy. It's not easy. I have heard some of our own teachers talking for 45 minutes, and I'm sure you guys have heard this. You're not making sense, but then in 3 minutes you have given up so many stories for us to ponder over. So it's the brevity in which you delivered. I think there is something that we need to learn, and the last point is equally impressive. Some of you are PhD scholars, so you have some experience. Some of your research associates after your post-graduation, you have some experience. Some of your postgraduate students and some of your undergraduate students. I think that's something we should take pride. That it is from those who are doing a doctorate to just finish the school and being. I think one of you said you are the first year undergrad. I think this is something. It's a matter of pride for the institute. I'm sure my director will also talk about this when we talk about capacity building. I think this is the real capacity building that we would be building. And then the last point, and then I'll Initially we thought we will do just one policy brief, but after listening to you, I think we have to go do our homework and then see how many policy briefs that can come from this group. It's a matter of pride for all of us. Let's give a big hand to the panel. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's one of the best events that we had and we organized in this institute. Thank you. Special thanks to all of you. May I request you to? Thank you. Looking forward to both Professor Bhanumurthy and Mr. Taras are with RIS in one form or the other, and Amit is very much a part of the RIS. No, we have circulated your short resume to all of you, so I don't want to spend more time on listing their huge resume. Instead, what we will do is we will listen to them. I have already circulated that to you. We'll start with Professor Shailesh Nayak, and then Professor Bhanumurthy, Mr. Taras, and Amit in that order. I hope that's okay with you. You may want to reflect upon what the young minds spoke to us, and also give a few points on that. 8 to 10 minutes each. I hope that is okay. If they can talk in 3 minutes, I think we can also do that. Over to you, sir.
I will take a little bit less. First of all, my compliments to all the First of all, my compliments to young scholars for excellent presentations and most important, keeping the time. Actually, when you have to speak less, you have to prepare. To speak 3 minutes, that means you must have all have done pretty good background work to do that. If you have to speak 45 minutes, which professors normally do, we don't need too much of a preparation for that. So that's very good. I think everybody had spent a lot of time on that. And the topics which you have said also, I think, is quite important and very wide range, as Subhas said, from climate change to space to maritime to coast to all sorts of things. But I also think the discussion which was followed and some of the very important point which came up, and I would like to couple of minutes on that. One which is came up on the migration. I think this is one area which is very important, and actually the whole civilization, everything built because of the migration. The first migration took place something around 165,000 years ago, when the climate was very cold and dry, and in Central Africa there was a drought, and the early human beings migrated towards the ocean, and where they got fish, and that's how the ocean. So many things I think can be linked in this way. What I am trying to say that some of the topics which you said can also be linked, and even now during climate change we are thinking there would be a migration, maybe some of the island states or like low-lying areas like Bangladesh and all. So there may be necessity to interlink these aspects, and the most important thing that once we interlink, how it still makes sense, instead of separating each, that you can think how you can. The second topic which I think you might have come up with is on the technology, especially the new technologies which is coming, AI, ML, and now ChatGPT, which is going to dramatically change the whole scenario. One of my colleagues said now the programs can come within 4 seconds, which used to take a few months to write it down. So things are changing, and this changing time the requirement will be different. I think some of you mentioned about the skills which we may need. Somebody mentioned about unemployment. I think the newer technology will not going to bring unemployment, but the different skills. You know, when the computers came, everybody felt that there will be a lot of unemployment because of that. But it created completely new kind of skills which is required. So think from those angles that how the new things which is coming up, what kind of skills would be necessary, and how do we build those skills. I think some of you mentioned about the skill, which is very, very critical. And last thing which I would like to say is about the major challenge which is going to come because of the climate change, which is likely to affect our water availability and many other related issues. Food, water, which are all indirectly connected to the climate change. And there, I think some of you mentioned about the action. Now, the issue is that we know the science part is very well understood, everything is known. But whether we are taking sufficient steps to mitigate and adapt to such changes. I think that is the most important. And what are the ways G20 can do that, how this can be done? And the famous example of Greta, she is 16 years old, entire world was galvanized because of that. So any one of you can also do similar things. So I think these are 3 points which I would like to put it forward and see that how you can connect the different issues to each other. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
For that brief note, we have Ambassador Balakrishnan. He was supposed to be with us. It's unfortunately he could not travel today. He was supposed to come from Delhi, but he has been listening to us. So he has left a series of remarks on online. So what I'll do is I'll request Avishka later, after the next intervention, because we are also preparing it, that he was listening to us to each one of our inputs and has been making comments. So I'll request Avishka to read those comments to you. Now I'll invite Professor Bhanumurthy to give his expert input.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, let me thank NIAS and RIS for inviting me to this very important event as part of the G20 presidency. And I also would like to congratulate RIS for initiating this Youth Connect. I think this has been happening across the country, and I would like to thank my good friend Sachin for initiating this. He felt that G20 should be discussed at the youth level, at the university level, at the institutions level. It was not initially part of the G20 agenda. So I think this is a great initiative from RIS, and I'm really thankful to Sachin for initiating this. Today I was sitting in the backside and just listening to all of you. It's absolutely fantastic session, I must say. I just concur with what you said. It has been a fantastic event, and when you grow old, you actually become very narrow, right? But at that level, I think the kind of coverage of issues, I'm really impressed by this idea that's coming out from this August gathering. And I'm also pleasantly surprised that we are in a very, very comfortable position that we don't want to talk about GDP. This one word, it was not uttered in this room. Okay, as a student of economics, we always sleep with GDP, drink GDP, walk GDP, everything GDP. So there was not even a word it was uttered here in this room. That shows we are in an absolutely comfortable position when it comes to economics. And that's actually showing up in the global world also, where India has been highlighted as a bright spot. So thanks to the governments, not just the central government, all the governments, the state governments who are equally part of this whole episode, that Indian economy is actually doing extremely well for kind of pragmatic policies that is being adopted by the governments in the post-COVID period. And if you want to understand the strength of the Indian economy, you need to look at other economies in the world where they're struggling with GDP, they're struggling with negative GDP growth, they are getting into recession, they are getting into inflationary pressure. So we are doing extremely well, and that is the way where when you are very comfortable, we forget that particular concept. So we have forgotten the GDP, no problem. And but at the same time, the one word most of the students who are actually highlighted, this word is collective. I think the collective is the word many students have actually used. That shows that actually reflects the theme of the Indian presidency, the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. I think to that extent, I'm glad the youth is actually part of the G20 presidency, and this is the whole objective of this kind of events. And I'm sure that it's not going to be only one policy brief. And I also request RIS to encourage all the speakers who have come here. If not a policy brief, at least the poster presentation should be allowed. And we are going to have the Think 20 initiative in the final program in Mysore sometime in August. I think RIS should take that initiative to get all the people who spoke today, at least the poster, if not a policy brief, so that many of you spoke actually emotionally in that sense. I think if you want to really get onto the table, you also need to be supported by empirics. Emotions is one thing, empirics is another thing. So I think one aspect which is missing in general discussion is the data issues. And there is a separate track that's happening in G20 that is called data for development. So one reason why India is not able to do well, we need to accept where we failed, where we succeeded. I started saying that in GDP we succeeded, but when it comes to SDGs, we have not really succeeded. So the reason for all this is basically the data gaps and the data constraint that we have. And I think as students, you need to really focus more on the data for development, and please keep track of the track of G20 that talks about data for development. So I think that is one thing I thought I'll bring it to the notice. Sorry, I'll be missing the time. Okay. And I'm also glad. I have been criticizing the youth for one reason, that they're busy with the crypto markets. Even that word is not being uttered here. Okay, there is no Bitcoin, there is no this kind, that kind. So I'm glad that there is nothing happening. But it is an important aspect in the G20 because it actually destabilizes the global financial architecture. So crypto is another thing that I thought it should come as part of the discussion. Financial literacy, again, is not been really coming up. Maybe we're all literate, but the financial literacy is one thing, is an important event, important aspect for youth to really, the point, none of you talked about crypto. Now I can assume that all of you literate in terms of financial market. Okay, and so a lot of people discussed about heritage. I think this is another aspect which is which is a main part of G20 presidency, and I urge all of you to really take this up as a part of your curriculum. We at our university, Ambedkar School of Economics, we are the first universities to start economics of heritage paper as part of the curriculum in the second year of undergraduation. So I think, in fact, we are doing this with Intact. Okay, we had Bangalore walks and all those things. So heritage should be part of a curriculum. I think it should not stop. 2023 G20 presidency should not be the first and last place where we talk about all these issues. I think we need to sustain all these issues going forward. And one more small point, I'll just talk and I'll stop here. There is not much discussion about regulatory aspects. Again, in the G20, there's so much discussion happens on the regulation. And I think a lot of cooperation that needs to happen, that should be on the regulatory aspect. But there are so many topics. I mean, I'm absolutely, as I said, it is absolutely a treat for all of us. I think each one is area of research. I think I urge all of you to really continue to do this and continue to work on that particular topic. so that we will be doing justice to what the Prime Minister aimed that to achieve this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Bhanumurthy. Thank you for that crucial point. Passion is important, but data is also equally important. I'm sure our scholars will we all start with passion somewhere, and then as we progress, I think we will get matured, and then with people like you to help us and guide us, I'm sure they will be able to walk longer. Thank you also for giving that space about the posters that you mentioned. But I'm quite confident our scholars will be able to write a few briefs. In fact, we have already started. We have formed a small group from Chennai to Mysore to Bangalore. We have formed a group. We will work on that, and then we will be in touch with you. We'll come and bother you. Since you have promised in public, you have to give us the space. we will come there. We will come in a big group. Yes or no? Yeah, so we'll take him seriously, and then we'll be there with you, sir, Mysore, with all our posters and also briefs.
Actually, we also have another event happening in Bangalore sometime. We are going to have a town hall event, and our university is the secretariat for one of the themes. So we will be having one more event in the month of April. So I'm sure I would like to look forward to see all of them in my event as well.
Thank you. Yeah. That's a wonderful invitation that we have got. This is what NIAS does. You go for one event, you go for one, you get two events. I think I'm quite a good PR person, no? No. Now next, let's move to Mr. Taras. He's another maverick in a way, with a financial background and a research background, sir. Over to you. Thanks for being with us. Yeah.
Good evening to all of you. Thank you, National Institute of Advanced Studies, for providing this space for RIS and the government to host this University Connect event. In fact, I was just thinking what I should be sharing in terms of my thoughts about the G20. But I think, it was a learning process for me. I was thinking to talk about what the G20 is about, what are the member countries, things like that. I think I will not do that now because I learned a lot from you. A great many ideas have emerged during the short presentation made by all of you. I must congratulate and compliment all of you for this wonderful contribution. And also, it is a good idea to have a task forces of the youth. You call it youth or you call it students, I leave it to you. And then, have a thematic issues. And then, under each of the thematic issues, you jot down your ideas and perhaps also the action points. Because, ideas are important, but unless they can be converted into action points, there is very little that G20 can do at the global level. So when we suggest ideas, when we put forth ideas, they should be backed up by the action points and the policy aspects also. The whole G20 emerged out of the financial crisis, initially of the 1997-98 crisis, but that was not at the summit level, not at the leaders level. That was at the finance ministers and central bank governors level. But exactly 9 years after that, in 2008, it had to be elevated to the level of the summit leaders because the global financial crisis was so severe that it could not be addressed at the finance ministers level, as it required huge coordination among the major countries of the world. Now, G20 countries together form nearly 65% of the world population and about 85% of GDP. Now, some of the ideas which you have suggested, I was ruminating over those ideas, and as Dr. Bhanumurthy was indicating that I am also economist, by education, and finance and economics by practice. none of you have touched upon the GDP, none of you have touched upon the per capita GDP, none of you have touched upon growth, but you have touched upon the sustainable development. Yes, that is what is being talked about now in G20. In fact, if you see the themes the India has chosen for this G20 under its presidency, it is about lifestyles for environment, and values and ethics and well-being. It is one of the themes of the task forces under T20, Think 20. Now, why is this focus? Now, the globe has realized, the world has realized that focusing only on GDP will lead us to the problems we are facing at present, whether it is in terms of the environment, in terms of the losing of the biodiversity. Of course, you are the master on biodiversity and the climate. I will not venture to talk on those areas. But the fact that, in spite of the landmark agreements reached by the global community in 2015 on the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, Addis Ababa Action Agenda as to how to finance these Sustainable Development Goals, and the Paris Agreement, all these three landmarks were committed by the global community in 2015. That was after the realization that growth alone will not lead us to anywhere. Instead, we will have to keep worrying about the ecological imbalances, the environmental degradation, and things like that. But unfortunately, what has happened is that despite the G20 and the global community pursuing these goals, since 2015, we are, I think, as we were in 2015. Of course, some achievement, some progress was made till 2019, but that was very little. But then again, the COVID pandemic has reversed whatever that was achieved during those initial years, and now we are back to the square. Because of these reasons, India thought that, the Indian government thought that it is time we focus more on the sustainable development issues. It is time we focus more on the lifestyle issues. So RIS has been working on the issues of well-being for quite some time, and we have taken studies on how to measure well-being. You might be aware that many countries and global organizations have put in place the multidimensional development matrices. But then, whether they are good enough to address the problems of G20, or whether they can be replicated across all other countries. Because, so if you look at the well-being measures, some have taken 20 odd variables, some have taken more than 150 odd variables. Now, if you aggregate all these variables, you will get some index. In what that index will indicate and whether that will reflect the conditions prevailing in all the countries, we are not sure about that. So we thought that it is time we again review the existing well-being measures, and RIS has taken a major exercise in formulating well-being, maybe suggested for the G20 to deliberate. This is one of the exercises which I thought I should share with you. And in regard to the Sustainable Development Goals, RIS in collaboration with OECD has also been working on how to accelerate achieving Sustainable Development Goals. Unfortunately, despite the commitments by the advanced economies, the Development Assistance Committee members, the funds that are flowing to the Sustainable Development Goals are not adequate. So what needs to be done? So far the world is addressing basically at the international finance flows. But now time has come to look within that the national governments, the local communities. So all these, I think, you have said local communities involvement, national governments involvement. So we should be, focusing more on the efforts at our own level. Yes, of course, the international community will help to the extent, they can also leverage their resources. But I think the time has come to introspect and then see what innovative techniques, innovative ways we can formulate to see that we raise resources that are required to achieve the sustainable development goals. So I would say that it was a very wonderful experience for me, and I congratulate you again, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that brief note. Thank you also for letting us know what RIS is doing on these subjects. Now, before I invite Amit, with your permission, I'll request Femi to read out the comments from Ambassador Balakrishnan. He has been very patiently listening to us and then commenting on us. Femi is our research intern at the institute now.
Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan. Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan commented that he was glad to participate in the G20 University Connect online via YouTube live stream. I would like to thank him for engaging throughout the event. He said that the role of G20 in internationalization of higher education is important. He also agreed with the panelists that broadening gender equality is a delicate issue for several G20 countries. On the maritime aspect, Ambassador Balakrishnan said that the G20 member countries should do more to protect the marine biodiversity in EEZs and the high seas. He highlighted that the present technology for deep sea mining could severely impact marine life, and therefore many countries have called for a moratorium until further studies are conducted on environmental impact. Ambassador also pointed out that promoting a circular economy has been an important theme in several G20 forums and is gaining increased attention. This was evident in the Fifth Assembly of the United Nations of Environmental Assembly. And last but not the least, he thanked all the young speakers for the excellent discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Femi. It's not easy to concise somebody's point, but then you did a good job. And let's thank Ambassador Balakrishnan also for being with us. May I now invite Dr. Amit. Amit is from RIS. Amit, over to you.
Respected dignitaries on the dais, and students, colleagues, and friends, good afternoon. I join my senior colleagues, panelists, and Professor Chandran in complimenting and congratulating all the young scholars who actually brought everything, I would say more 3/4 of the issues what G20 is already discussing and is under discussion at the political level or leaders level to the table, along with some action points, which is the takeaway for me and for all of us. They thought about that issue and they came out with some of the recommendations is highly commendable, and as Professor Chandran said, that it should be documented and a policy book should be come out on those lines, which would be helpful to us also and for other engagement groups also. T20 is one of them, Youth 20, other 20s are there, Women 20, and so all the issues can go to somewhere, all to the engagement groups and also to the development working groups. Data for development is one of those areas which Professor Bhanumurthy mentioned. These where we could bring issues related to not only data in that sense, but also to sustainable development goals and issues where India would like to put forward some of those narratives, which is not only for India, but for the whole of global South. As Prime Minister has already mentioned that we want India to be the voice of global South at G20. We are the largest democracy, we are the 5th largest economy, and we should also be the voice to more than 90% of those countries who are not represented in the G20. So we see this as an occasion where not only we shape the global agenda around all the critical issues you mentioned and other issues, but also to place on the table the issues of country like us, emerging economies, and developing countries and poor countries. And this is a great occasion, once in a lifetime for us, because the next G20 presidency will come after 20 years. So we are in that particular frame of time, and we should be proud of ourselves, and we should give whatever we can do, so that when it comes to the next set of people are judging us, they would say that we brought everything on the table with the recommendations and actions. Whether they are taken or not, it's not our job. That leaders have to decide. But we, at our academic researchers and students, have done our job, which matters. On G20, I'm not going to speak on any specific topic. I'm just will bring out what we have been trying to do at our institution, as Tada sir has mentioned also, that we bring these issues at whatever platform we get. So T20 event, we had a special event in Bhopal last month, and we discussed these issues. And some of the points what you mentioned, the young scholars, was those which we can observe and convey to the respective engagement groups, and as I mentioned, those who are working on declarations part. So I can assure you that we would definitely look forward for your inputs and your continued engagement. It's not just one-off events. This is a whole big series of lectures. We are going to talk to all young scholars across India, 76 universities. This is just the 10th one. So we have a big road to go ahead. But then I'm very sure that this kind of engagement would help us and the country. But let me also congratulate NIAS and Professor Chandran under the leadership of Sir Salis, that this curation of the event is unique. It's the first time it has happened that we hear young scholars right at the beginning, and let that ownership reflected. Earlier it was little one-sided. One of the lead speakers come, and then we have question answer sessions. But question answer sessions is what you want us to reply. Here we saw that what you on your own come out with as resolutions, solutions, which matters actually. You are the next generation global leaders shaping the agenda and taking forward the cause. Not for this country, but for the global south and also north. So this is good that this kind of engagement was very much seen here, and I expect that the next set of events on the University Connect should emulate this model, and we get more of our youth engagement in that line. One more thing, that since it is University Connect, we want it's little different than Youth Connect. So in youth, generally we talk about those who are startups, young post-college, post-university students. This is where your strength is, research and academic input based on empirics and emotions both. So you bring onto the table some concrete evidence-based narration, which helps us. I'm not talking about us, because to the policymakers and those who are working on towards seeing that these action plans are developed and implemented, to feed them. So Think 20 and this University Connect is one of those I see as an ideas bank to the G20, and I wish all the best to all the young scholars, and we see and hope that this Connect series goes on the same momentum which started today at NIAS. And thank you so much, sir, for this beautiful arrangement in this amazingly beautiful campus in Bangalore. And so on behalf of institution, I thank you so much, and to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you for those kind words about the initiative and also about the institute. My only request to you is don't keep it as a secret. Please inform that there is a group here doing this, and then this is something that we could replicate. I think we need more such models. It came through a large era of trial and error, and of course the larger conviction that that institution stands on in terms of capacity building, right from our founder director to the current one that there is a it's constantly drilled into us. With that note, let me bring this presentation, that intervention to an end, and then request, would we want to pose a few questions to the experts? I liked what Amit said at the end. The next G20 to India will come after 20 years. I don't know where we would be, but we hope that you will be leading all these A20, B20, C20. Maybe you may have new 20s to add. I don't know, 20 years before we would ever thought about all these things. But since you have started something, I think that is something in the next 20 years should be a good story to tell. I'm sure some of you may be leading, like what Professor Bhanumurthy was telling, you would be leading your own 20 that time. So let us pose some questions to them and what we can learn from them. Please, sir, we'll start with him. He's a faculty in Department of Economy, Kristu Jayanti College. Please. Yeah, please.
Good evening.
We will put it as a young faculty.
Yeah, good evening, panelists. Thank you for your wonderful and knowledge enriching session. Here, discussion was well and good, simply super. Lot of ideas, unique kind of ideas, of course. But again, a $1 million question is, there are ideas how to implement it. And again, if we stop using conventional source of energy, what is a substitute? First of all, for example, when we stop, use of crude oil, EV, electric vehicles, there is no any kind of service in the sense recharging centers. Like, therefore, what will happen is lack of alternative setup. Whenever we stop, all of a sudden, existing setup, use of conventional source of energy, sustainable development in the sense we should not cause any damage, of course. But at the same time, we cannot stop production. If we stop production, it leads to unemployment. Again, we will go dark. So already GHI 109 position from 102nd position. Like this, economy would enter, like vicious cycle of poverty actually. And inflation is there, unemployment is there. And by 2025, India ranks first in population. Again, we are going to face a series of questions again. At the same time, simultaneously, we are talking on sustainable development without using conventional source of energy.
Thank you. We'll go to him. Can I see the hand so that I kind of have a sense how many of us are going to pose a question? Please, give it to him. Take note. We'll come back to you at the end.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Prashant Thava from AM Economics, Kristu Jayanti College. So, as we talk about digital-driven economy, developing countries are facing digital gap between regions and genders. So, how G20 countries will be addressing these issues?
That side? Someone raise a hand? No? Yeah, you're tired. Yeah, I think there are too many ideas, too many discussion. You're tired, No,
so many questions
no, they should also understand when they speak first. This is what happened to us. Sir, anyways, those two questions. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think I will.
Yeah.
I will respond to the first question about the conventional energy and all. I think it is when you shift from one energy source to the other, it is not that the earlier source is not used. You know, when we shift what we are talking about from fossil fuel based to the renewables, it is not that the fossil fuel based energy will not be used at all, because as of now the renewables is not sufficient in the sense to total energy demand. So there would be some what we call as a transition, and you must see that now the lot of talk not only about the renewables but also about the nuclear and also hydrogen. So as the technology evolved, it would make that kind of a changes, because the one thing which everybody believes that the development and energy are related, linearly related. But the challenge is that whether it is really true, how we can continue to be developed with a more efficient use of the energy. And the great example is the now in the bulb which we have been seeing, you know, now the 60-watt bulb, what we were using, now it can be done with a 9-watt bulb. So the technology will also allow you to become more and more efficient with a less and less amount of energy. And this transition, when we do this, will become a part of it. So there is no need to worry that if we shift completely on this, what will happen? I don't think no country will say that we will not develop because the energy is the issue. We will try to find out how energy become more clean than what we have been using. That's what I think. Thank you.
Can you come again? The last one.
Hello. So when one of the priorities of G20 is digitally driven economy, right? So when we talk about digital driven economy, so developing countries are facing the digital gap between among regions and genders as well. So how G20 countries will be addressing these issues?
Add you are able to hear, no? Let me add a bit to what Dr. Shailesh ji has explained, elaborated on the how we can shift over from conventional to non-conventional energy. When we know that if we do it in the short run, it will lead to unemployment. As it is, developing countries have many problems. Yes, that is a point well taken. The issue is not that, because we know that any transformation will take time, and it is a process. I remember when we used to talk of solar energy, it was in the late 90s and early 2000 when this whole concept emerged, and I was handling project finance on the power sector during that time in IDBI, which was then Industrial Development Finance. What we noticed was that immediate shifting also commercially is not viable, not possible. So the technology has to evolve completely to reap the benefits of the cost advantage. For instance, when we appraised a project in early 2000, the cost per unit was 14 rupees per unit, whereas as consumers we were paying only about 2 or 3 rupees. Who will bridge this gap? The subsidy amount involved was very high. Of course, government was giving capital subsidy and things like that. But then, just to promote, we did finance with some viability gap funding models and all. But now, over a period of 20 years, why I'm bringing this point is that over a period of 20 years, the cost of solar energy has now come down to about 4 to 5 rupees per unit, which is almost competing with the thermal energy, which is about 3 rupees range. So I think one is, yes, the technologies are evolving and emerging, and then it is a process. But then it doesn't mean that when we switch over, that we are going to lose our employment, we are going to lose our income. No, it is not like that, because it is a process. The economy will adjust in the process. Now, second is about the digital, driven economy. As Dr. Shaileshji has explained in his remarks, that we have moved from a traditional systems, operating systems, to more of a technology-driven systems. In fact, we have been working on some themes in RIS in collaboration with some overseas institutions on how we can think of new operating systems. I am talking not from the technology point of view, but from the economic systems point of view here. Now, when we talk of new operating systems, we were traditionally thinking of, shift from agriculture to industry to services in economic theory and all. And accordingly, the operating system in the economy emerged surrounding this kind of a process. Now we are, away from that, or moving away from that to technology-driven sectors. You find technology in agriculture, technology in industry, technology in services, and everywhere. So in order to address, you cannot have an operating system which was working 30, 40 years ago. You need a new operating system. So that you have open access systems in this. So ultimately you will find that the skill development, the capacity building will lead to enabling people to familiarize themselves, and then get into these new job opportunities, employment opportunities. And I think the economy will slowly, like we used to talk of industry 2.0, industry 3.0. Now we are talking of not just industry, we are talking of technology 2.0, technology 4.0, and things like that. So I think it is a process, it will evolve. And then digital, you have seen in India itself in the last 3 years how much the digital transactions have increased. Even the villages are used to digital transactions now, and a lot of the fintech companies have come in the last 5 years. In fact, when I was in IDBI in 2015, virtually the fintech companies were non-existent. In fact, there was the question which was addressed to us as financiers: how much you think fintech companies would affect your business? That time we were not so much aware of the fintech companies, which were basically digital-driven, technology-driven companies. We said that ultimately the customers need a brick and mortar system. So I think we will exist side by side with the fintech companies. That was the answer we gave to them, I remember very much. And this is now about 7 years, 8 years after that. Yes, fintech companies have, number of fintech companies have come after that. The banks have also been there side by side. So I think they will coexist. And yes, even the banks are also adopting to the digital technologies. This is how the changes will occur, I think. If you want to add something.
Yeah, I think Dr. Tadas already given very elaborate answer. It looks like students are shying away from economics, but also shying away asking questions to the economists also. So assumption is that economists are not social scientists, right? But anyway, the two questions, I think there's a little different reason why you have asked this question. When you're shifting from one technology to another technology, what will happen to I think Sarah has already pointed out. In fact, 2 days back, I was just talking about this budget. I mean, this is the budget season, right? We get employment now only, not after 1 month. So we're busy in talking about budgets. One of the students asked me, sir, there's so much of focus on green growth, green technology, all those things. But India is also have a huge reserves of coal. What do we do with that reserve. Now, I don't have any answer for that. Seriously. I mean, I don't know whether I'm talking from Indian perspective now, not from the G20 perspective. I think when we really get into these new technologies, there's a great concern how the countries who are not part of that innovation, how they adopt that, and what is the cost of that adoption. I think these are the issues that keep coming back and forth. So if your production process gets into high cost technology, and I'm sure you'll become less competitive, and I mean the rest of the things will flow. So I think what is important from the G20 is that how to share this technology without much cost escalation to the countries, and at the same time how the G20 countries on their own can spend more on the R&D. And I think the students, those who are here, particularly NIAS, I think you should be questioning this, why countries in G20, especially some of the developing countries in G20, are actually spending less on the R&D. I mean, I'm sure Dr. Naik knows what I'm trying to say, so we can talk about it a little later. But I think this is the place where we need innovations and we need cost-effective technologies, and that's how it has to go, not just depending on other countries' technologies. In terms of the digital gap, again, you must be really proud to say that you are from India, that we have been a champion in terms of how to use the digital technology for public delivery mechanism. Now, there are two innovations that happened in the last 2 years, which we actually shared with all the countries in the global south. One is that CoWIN, right? The CoWIN, that software or that app that we had, and the other one is the UPI. Now, UPI, we consider that as a public good. It is not India's alone. I think we want to see that it has to be shared with all the countries in the global south, and whatever the top things that we are adopting, ultimately it has to lead to reduction in the cost. I mean, as an economist, I'm talking about it. So ultimately, anything that we adopt, it has to lead to reduction in the cost. Then only it is going to be more sustainable. So I think India has already played a major role, and I'm sure the G20 presidency will also make that affordable technology. I think that is what should be the mantra of G20 presidency.
Thank you. We'll just take two more questions. I'll start with Apoorva and then one here. No, we'll start from Apoorva. Just come.
Good evening. My name is Teresa. I'm from Kristu Jayanti College. My question is related to climate change. That is one of the important topics in G20. So according to the Paris Agreement, the main goal of the Paris Agreement was to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So US as a major global power, even it had taken the decision to phase down the undated coal power and limit the global methane pledge. But parallelly, if you see, US is among the 20 countries which has the largest developed oil and gas reserves, and it is also among the 9 countries that is responsible for 90% of global coal production. And additionally, the US plans to increase its gas and coal production by more than 5% by 2030. If you see, it's a contrast, like the decisions that they have made, that their decision to actually comply with the policies of the Paris Agreement, that is to decide the cut down of coal power and to increase also the coal production. So that would ultimately affect the global policy related to climate change. So how would the G20 and the Indian president?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we'll come back to it. We have been arguing this. Just give it to Apoorva. When we become hegemonic, we will do the same thing. Trust me.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, panel, for the discussion. When I look at the G20, I see that most of the countries in the G20 were severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, be it with regard to healthcare, access to healthcare, or vaccine shortages. One question I would like to, or one proposal that I have is, how about G20 countries start something like a medical corridor where we can have an exchange of ideas on research and developments on medicine, as well as supply of medicine or a supply chain on the same. Yeah.
note, I'll come back to the panel. Sir, can we have a quick, brief answers? Otherwise, our tea will get cold.
Yeah, I think this is very true. It's not true for only US, but also the Europe. Even today, US uses more thermal energy than India. Europe also, which after the Ukraine crisis, they have gone back gas and they have started the coal-based plants. So ultimately, it is the national interest. I think everybody looks at the first their national interest, and they will advise others that you don't use it. That is what is normally being done. So that is why the first time India took a very tough stand and said that we should, instead of coal, there should be fossil fuel has been replaced. And phasing out coal, they have put a phase down. So this is important because, and somebody who asked you why we should not use coal, I think we will continue to use coal. At least 50% of the energy will come from the coal. There is no way that 100% you can replace, at least up to 2070. I don't think it is going to happen. But these are, some of the areas where the negotiations, the data, actually, I think you mentioned. Last few years only India has started putting the data and say that why what we are saying. According to our analysis in NIAS, why this net zero came. Net zero came because they wanted to shift the goalpost. They have not done anything about Paris Agreement, so they wanted to shift to new goal. US should have been net zero by 2024. So they have shifted to 2050. Europe should be 2034. So they have shifted to 2050. India, as per the current, we should be net zero by 2070, and we have stick to that. So we have not shifted our goalposts. They have been shifting. So but these are, I can't answer all these in a very, but your question is absolutely right. And I think India has to provide the arguments that why what we are doing is correct. That is the most important.
We'll bring this session to an end. They will be with us during tea. So we'll catch them. What I'll do, I'll request Dr. Vinoda, head of the Economics Department of Economy in Kristu Jayanti, to propose a vote of thanks from our partner institution. Vinoda, the floor is yours.
A very warm good evening to one and all present here. First and foremost, before getting into the formal vote of thanks, I would like to thank the minds which came out with an idea called G20 University Connect with the theme of engaging young minds. So far, such kind of meeting will happen at policy level. So the first time our students are also able to participate. So I'm very glad now they don't tell that they have learned this G20 as theory in their notes. They were part of it. So they have discussed with the experts. So for that, first of all, I have to thank the minds which came out with an idea and the institutions who took initiative in executing such thing in a well-mannered way. So I have to thank, first of all, NIAS, Ministry of External Affairs, G20, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, for executing this with a theme of engaging young minds. Thank you very much for it. Coming to the formal session, I would like to also thank Professor Shailesh Naik, Director, NIAS, Professor Balakrishnan, former Ambassador Visiting Fellow, and Professor N.R. Bhanumurthy, Vice Chancellor, Base University, Bengaluru, Mr. G.A. Tadas, Visiting Fellow, RIS for engaging our young minds with recent global changes and giving their feedback on what are the points discussed by our students and the panelists. So I also always convey my thanks to Sir Subhash Chandra Sir, so for approaching us and bringing our institution into our discussion where our students benefited out of it by directly interacting with the experts in this field. And I also thank the other participants from different institutions. I also take this opportunity to thank NIAS, the research scholars, for their hospitality and approachability. Thank you very much for that. So we are looking for such kind of collaboration in future also, where the student community will be involved in the policy making. So thank you very much, sir, and experts for that input. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. This event of this magnitude would not have happened without the participation from the other institutions, from Mysore to Chennai to Pondicherry. Just from our side, I think it would be important that we also have a vote of thanks from our side, the team that worked hard. I'll request Padmashree to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the team and the institute.
Thank you, sir. It would be my privilege to present the vote of thanks on behalf of NIAS. First, I would like to thank the institutions, Ministry of External Affairs and RIS for giving the NIAS opportunity to conduct the G20 University Connect. I would also like to thank our director, Professor Shailesh Nayak, and Professor Sachin, Director General, RIS, for their support. I would like to extend my thanks to Ambassador Balakrishnan and Professor Banamurthy for their inputs for today. I would like to extend my thanks to Dr. Amit and Mr. Tadas for giving your valuable inputs for the discussion, sir. Now, I would like to thank our other programs at the Institute, Dr. Rajni from the Heritage Program and Dr. Sindhu Radhakrishnan for adding value to the discussion. And I extend our gratitude to our partner institutions, Kristu Jayanti College, for their immense support and the young scholars' active participation. Special thanks to the visual communication team. And I also like to thank the Ramaiah University and Mysore University for taking part in the discussion. The real value for today's discussion was met with the interesting inputs and questions from young panelists and students, making it apt to the given theme. Thank you all for that. I would like to lastly thank the NIAS admin, library, and the office staff for their relentless support, and my team members Avishka, Apoorva, Femi, and Ankit for your support for today's discussion. Today's dynamic discussion sets base for future dialogue and action. I thank you all for being very curious, energetic, and active participants. Thank you all.
No, I'll bring this session to an end with a request. I think we should all have a group picture. Who knows, 20 years down the lane, when you become the T20, we would want to know all these people were with us in 20 years before. For that, I would request you to will be very happy to have a picture outside and then join us for a cup of tea. There are also a few notes, the G20 notes for circulation kept outside. Please feel free to pick up. The tea is served outside. The photo first.